So this is our vision of a glass gallery that we're going to have the shuttle in, and we're looking forward to that. Now I just wanted to close because space is kind of my thing, and it's still involved in through the National Academy of Engineers on a number of panels. What's next? Well, you know, we had, oops, for some reason that one didn't show up. Well, I think it just, oh, this will make it easy. I'm just going to fast forward here. See what that does. Okay, you know, 100 years ago, we weren't at either pole. And now we have many nations at the South Pole. So you can envision in this century that there are a lot of reasons to go back to the moon. And there are other nations interested. And that we ought to be there. We ought to be leading there. We've got 6 flags there. We want to keep them there. So there might be a lunar base in this century. Mars is one of those big, it's the 4th planet from the Earth. If you go into our space exhibit, there's something called the magic planet. You can pick a planet and see what it looks like. We know there used to be water on that planet, big volcanoes. It could have even harbored microbial life. We have recovered Antarctica's, or meteorites from Antarctica, which indicate that. But what happened to it? As a thin carbon dioxide atmosphere, it probably had a different atmosphere at one time. So maybe in 20 years it's a Martian base. You know, what will this generation explore? And what kind of technologies will be required to go make that happen? What will we learn about Mars that will instruct us about our own planet? We put Viking 1 and 2 on Mars in 1976. The first 2 landers, both successful. The overall success rate among all nations is 50%. It is hard to do. It's, you know, a 6-month trip out or more. Transmission back and forth, it takes 20 minutes each way. So I can say hi, you'll hear it 20 minutes later. You'll say hi back, I'll hear that 20 minutes later. That's a 40-minute round trip just on voice transmission. And yet we landed 2 vehicles there in 1976. And I'm convinced after looking at the whole history of aviation and space and exploration that an astronaut walking up to Viking is not a question of if, it's a question of when and who, and will it be the United States? How many of you knew that China's already launched 3 crews to space, getting ready to their 4th? They want to build a space station. They are the 3rd great power into space. It was Soviet Union with Sputnik, then us, and now China. India has announced, they launched their own satellites. They've introduced some technology to start a human spaceflight program. Europe has said the same thing. Japan's been designing, they've designed their own rockets, and they actually have a resupply module that docks to the station, and they've been talking about building a shuttle. So this will be an interesting century about who gets there next and what are the destinations. And so I'd like to close just with a quote from Dr. Robert Goddard, because he had an interesting history. He was 17, he climbed to the top of a tree. He thought, gee, I'd like to get higher. Like a lot of us, I was thinking higher as a young kid. Some of you too. And he went to become a physicist, and he started working on rockets. And in the 20s, he gave a speech in New York, and there was a reporter there. And the next day, the reporter wrote this scathing editorial in the New York Times that said, even the simplest high school student knows it's impossible for liquid-fueled rockets to work in the vacuum of space. But that didn't deter him, and I use this story with young kids because they think once you get criticized in the press, you should give it up. So that didn't deter Robert Goddard. He just took all of his research to Roswell, New Mexico, and that's where he did most of his rocket research, and you can see a model of his first rocket in the space exhibit. And he even came back to help with the war effort, and I think it was in the jet engine technology, but he died in 1945, pretty much at the end of the war. But it was his wife who brought most of his patents to print. And on the day that Neil Armstrong launched to the moon, the New York Times printed a public apology to Robert Goddard on the front page of the newspaper. I think was fitting. And when NASA added its very last research center, it was the Goddard Space Flight Center, you've probably heard of it, Greenbelt, Maryland, and that center is responsible for the Hubble Space Telescope and the great observatories that have left our solar system, and for the Spirit and Opportunity rovers on Mars right now. So it's a great story, a great lesson for us, and Robert Goddard was also a high school speaker, I think, at his graduation. And if you visit the center, you see his quotes around there. This is one of my favorites. I keep it on my desk. It's difficult to say what is impossible, for the dreams of yesterday become the hopes of today and the realities of tomorrow. So I want to thank you for the pilots, the World War II group here, for your service to our country, for the opportunity as the museum president to help keep that history alive and there for the next generation forever, and for all of you for helping to celebrate it. And thank you, and I hope all your dreams become realities. Thank you very much. Long day, but if you'd like to ask a couple questions and can hang in there, I'm happy to help.
I've been wondering about something for many years, and that is on the shuttle, and also well, the shuttle and the space station, your bathroom facilities.
Well, it is a favorite question. The question was about the bathroom facilities. Well, the restroom on the shuttle is just inside the hatch, and it's very much, if you were to go into a commercial airliner and open the door, it looked actually very similar. The difference is that on Earth we use gravity to separate the waste from the body, the solid and the liquid. In a weightless environment, you use airflow. So you actually strap yourself, or physically restrain yourself on the bathroom commode, and there is a valve that opens, and it's airflow, slight vacuum separates the waste from the body. And once they got that perfected in the early days of the shuttle, because, by the way, Apollo, they used bags. That was pretty crude. But the shuttle bathroom works wonderfully well. Yes?
What's your touchdown speed in the shuttle?
Touchdown speed in the shuttle is 195 knots, a little over 200 miles per hour. Yes, in the back.
I have a question about the booster rockets. After blastoff, and they burn out, it was my impression that they were automatically jettisoned. But you made a remark that after they burn out, you or the crew jettison them. Do you do that manually?
No, it is automatically jettisoned. What we're watching is that we have data on board, and we see the chamber pressure. And the chamber pressure has to go below a certain level before they are jettisoned. And I believe we might even have an SRB override, but it's normally an automatic jettison once the chamber pressure gets to a certain level.
Was there ever a time when they were not jettisoned right away?
No, we've never had a problem with a jettison. The only problems we ever had with the SRBs were on the Challenger accident, when a couple of the O-rings, because it's a segmented booster, a couple of the O-rings failed, and the plasma actually went sideways. The Challenger shuttle did not blow up. What really happened is it was a smart failure in a lot of ways. You have 360 degrees in a circle, and where that O-ring failed, it could have failed away from the shuttle, and it would have changed the trajectory a little bit. But instead, that hot plasma went towards the strut that held the rocket to the external tank, and it actually melted the strut. And what happened is when that strut melted, then the vehicle stack started to break apart. And it broke apart at a high enough altitude that all of the fuels up there, the liquid hydrogen and oxygen, all been vaporized as well. So that's the only problem we've ever had really with the SRBs.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. In the very back, in the red?
I know you're doing a big push for engineering, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But with the chart and stuff, the difference in how you're building up more engineers, but how are you getting them to not go into civil or structural or just mechanical? Because you want them into ceramic and...
You need them in all engineers. We need, when I say engineers, I mean all disciplines. We have a shortage of electrical engineers. We have kids going into computer software, but that's not electrical engineering. You know, you've got to build the circuit boards and create them. That's hard engineering, you know. But we need that. We need them in civil. We need them in mechanical and aerospace, in materials engineering. We need them in all of them. Yes.
Bonnie, what is the political environment dealing with the space shuttles and space in general in our country?
Well, I'm concerned about the political environment. You know, it takes leadership to stay ahead, and I fear that the American public thinks we're still leading. You know, most of them don't know we have a space station in Earth orbit. Most don't know that the Chinese and the Indians are in their own space race. You know, India said, well, if China's going, I'm going. You've heard that one before. And anytime great nations explore, they invest in new technology, they push the envelope, and that comes back into development of wealth and business. And when we back away from that, we're basically saying let someone else lead. And right now that's where we are. The shuttle was built for 100 missions. It's being prematurely retired. I was an engineer on it. The fleet leader right now is around 35 missions. But structurally, they're like the B-52. They can fly a long time as long as you inspect them every 5 years. You know, you keep them flying. And there was the reason they were going to retire is because they were going to have a replacement vehicle. But they've canceled the replacement vehicle. So right now, we'll retire the shuttle as of next year. We'll have no heavy launch vehicle to get us out of Earth orbit again. And the proposal in the administration is to cancel the current crew compartment, Orion, which is life support. And you know, that's not a simple thing. Whether you're flying an airplane or building a spacecraft, that's an expertise that other nations would pay to rob you of, because that put people into Earth orbit. And so I am concerned we'll lose that, you know, the corporate memory, the technical capability, and then when we really think we want it, we'll have to reinvent it all over again. So the good news is that Congress is reassessing the budget proposal right now, and on a bipartisan basis is trying to add money back in to at least have a heavy lift capability and a crew compartment that will continue forward, a crew capsule. But the bottom line is once we retire the shuttle, the only way we'll be able to get to our space station is on the Russian Soyuz vehicle, and we'll have to buy seats. So they've already started laying off astronauts because they don't need that many astronauts. Instead of flying 7 at a time with the shuttle, you can fly a maximum of 3. But the U.S. can't take all 3 seats. The Russians, in their treaty, say there's always a Russian on board the Soyuz and always a Russian on board the station.
Is there something that we could do as a group to be able to have maybe some little influence, like a resolution from us or a letter or personal calls? What would you suggest?
Well, I suggest, one of the things, I had 3 tours at Washington, D.C., and one of the things I learned, and I worked with Congress, I was at NASA headquarters, and some of you may have already learned this as well, is that NASA received hundreds of thousands of positive pieces of mail every year. You know, let's keep exploring, we need to maintain leadership. But Congress, they didn't write to Congress. People write to the congressman when they don't like something. But the congressman would tell me when I'd go over to brief him, they'd say, well, you know, I don't get any mail from our constituents. I don't think they're interested in space. So letters of interest and support, they need to go directly to your congressman. And you can do it on an individual basis, or you can do it as a group. But they need to know Americans care about space leadership. And they need to overcome the misconceptions on cost. When we went to the moon, our investment was 4.4% of the federal budget at the peak. And it all was spent here on Earth, as we know. You know, it went into new technologies, it went into education, and, you know, just on and on. Right now, our investment in human spaceflight is less than 0.5%. And our population is 300 million. The cost per American is about the cost of a DVD. We spend more on pizza and potato chips in this country than we do on human spaceflight. It's a question of priorities and investment. And it's not a lost investment when you're spending on new technologies and educating you know, students in engineering. It's something that will pay for decades and generations to come. And that needs to, you know, I think the American public need to be told that, and they need to make it clear to their congressmen that they understand that. You know, we just, and now this is off the record, but I look at the fact that we dumped $1 trillion into the economy last year, and we could take just a fraction of that and we'd be on our way to Mars. You know, we'd be inspiring a whole new generation and new technologies, and we'd be showing our, in fact, they estimated that, you know, the NASA budget's what, about $16 billion, that if we added another 3 to 19, just a small percentage of $1 trillion, we would be working our way back to the moon and Mars.